In today's case, we explore a friendship that seemed perfect on the surface, a trusted bond between two best friends, one that involved family vacations, holidays, and the kind of loyalty most people dream of. But sometimes, trust can be the most dangerous thing you have, especially when it's hiding a dark secret. Brad McGarry was a 43-year-old openly gay man living in Bel Air, Ohio, a small town where everybody knows everybody. Though he had grown up dealing with harassment and prejudice, Brad had managed to carve out a life for himself, surrounding himself with close friends who accepted him for who he was. It was during his work as a coal miner that Brad met David Kinney, a young married man with a wife and kids. The two quickly became inseparable. David introduced Brad to his family, and soon, Brad was a constant presence in their lives. Known to David's children as Uncle Brad, he joined them for holidays, family trips, and day-to-day gatherings. To outsiders, it seemed like the perfect friendship, one rooted in mutual trust and respect. One afternoon, David Kinney, his wife Cherry, and their young daughter stopped by Brad's house to drop off a weed whacker. When they arrived, something immediately felt off. The front door was slightly ajar, and the house was eerily quiet. Concerned, they entered the home and called out for Brad. No response. Then they made a horrific discovery. In the basement, Brad's lifeless body lay on the floor, blood everywhere. Cherry immediately dialed 911, her voice trembling as she told the dispatcher that her friend was dead. David stood beside her, seemingly overwhelmed with shock. When the police arrived, the scene was chaotic. Rooms looked ransacked, and it was clear something terrible had happened. But what? And who could have done this to Brad? Detectives initially considered the possibility of a home invasion gone wrong, given the state of the house. But something didn't add up. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing valuable had been stolen. The crime scene just didn't match the typical profile of a burglary. As they began to dig deeper, investigators turned their attention toward Brad's personal life. They learned that Brad had recently ended a toxic relationship with a man named Scotty, and some wondered if this relationship had anything to do with the murder. However, detectives soon discovered that Scotty had been in jail at the time of Brad's death, eliminating him as a suspect. With that lead going nowhere, they shifted their focus elsewhere, trying to piece together who else could have had a motive to kill Brad. It wasn't long before detectives got their first major break. Brad's cousin, Skylar, came forward with critical information. Just hours before Brad's death, he had mentioned to her that someone named DJ was coming over that afternoon. Skylar knew this wasn't just a casual visit. Brad had implied that their relationship was romantic. But who was DJ? When Skylar provided more details, the detectives were floored. DJ wasn't some random stranger. It was Brad's best friend, David Kinney, the very man who had claimed to discover Brad's body with his family just hours earlier. The revelation left investigators in shock. Why hadn't David mentioned this during the investigation? And more importantly, what else was he hiding? Armed with this new information, detectives brought David in for questioning. At first, David stuck to his story, claiming he had nothing to do with the murder. But when they got permission to search his phone, the evidence told a very different story. Text messages and location data confirmed that David had been at Brad's house at the time of the murder. Caught in a web of lies, David changed his story. He now claimed there had been a third man in the house, a mysterious stranger who shot Brad during an argument. David insisted he was an innocent bystander, but detectives weren't convinced. The more they pressed, the more his story fell apart. Finally, in a desperate attempt to explain the situation, David made one last confession. He had killed Brad, but it was in self-defense. According to David, Brad had pulled a gun on him during an argument, and in the heat of the moment, David wrestled the gun away and fired. But when detectives examined the evidence, it was clear that this version of events didn't add up. Brad had been shot twice in the back of the head, making self-defense an impossible claim. The truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. David and Brad had been engaged in a secret affair for years, hiding the relationship from David's wife and children. But Brad had finally grown tired of the secrecy. He was ready to tell the truth, and that terrified David. Fearing his double life would be exposed, David made the chilling decision to silence Brad forever. On the day of the murder, David lured Brad to his home under the pretense of a romantic encounter. Once there, he shot Brad twice in the back of the head, staged the scene to look like a robbery, and then returned later with his wife and daughter to act shocked and distraught. When the case went to trial, the jury didn't buy David's ever-changing stories. They saw the murder for what it was, a cold-blooded killing motivated by fear and desperation. In February of 2018, David Kinney was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for Brad's friends and family, they were left grappling with the painful loss of a man who had meant so much to them. Brad McGarry's life was taken too soon by someone he trusted more than anyone else in the world. Here's the mugshot of David Kinney. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue creating and improving our content.